Hello, and welcome to Forecaster's updated basic Railcraft signaling tutorial. In this video, I'll be going through the basics of signaling, the components used, the tools, and how they work together. I will also be correcting a couple of mistakes I made in the previous video, as well as showing a couple of new features that have been added to Railcraft. Here we have your basic block signal, and as you can see, it can be placed one block underneath the rail on the same height the rail occupies, one block above the rail, of course 2 blocks above the rail, or at most 3 blocks above the rail, where there is 2 empty blocks between the rail and the signal. To link signals, you'll need a signal block surveyor. And to link the signals, you right-click one and you right-click another. And if the signal block is valid, it will be defined. And the signal block is the blocks between the signals, including the block the signal occupies. And here we have the signals 1 block away from the rail. Here we have the signals at varying heights. And here we have the signals at varying distances from the rail. Here we have an invalid block, where the rail is not a straight line between the signals. And since we started a survey on this signal, we have to abandon it by right-clicking it again to be able to start a new survey from a different signal. Here we have another invalid setup where the rail does not enter the scanning range of this signal. In this setup, we can define a block between the signals, but this track is not covered in the block. Here we have one of the new features added to Railcraft, the signal block relay. This box acts just like a signal while sharing the same limitations, with a few exceptions, such as being able to place rail directly on top of it, and as such being able to hide it underneath the rail. And it also has some additional functionality in that it can be used to link signal blocks together. So here we have 2 signal blocks, this one here and this one here, but since they are sharing this relay in the middle, they are considered a single block. So if a rail were to enter this part of the rail, all of these would react to the cart. And as it leaves this block and enters this part of the rail, this one would still react as if it were in this block. Note that the scanning rules still apply, so the rail needs to be within the scanning range of all the relays. So for example, placing the box here would not work because the rail would be outside its scanning range. We can also position them underneath the rail and still link them and have an almost completely hidden signal block that covers the corner. We can also use it to link regular signals together. So here we now have the same setup as over there, but with regular block signals at the ends. We cannot, however, have a regular block signal in the middle because it is simply incapable of relaying the block. So the connection between these two signals is lost in favor of the connection to this relay. Now it's time to look a little closer at what the signals actually do. As you can see, I have defined two signal blocks in front of me. One is the closer one, and the second is the one further away. As you can see, there is a cart occupying the closer one, and both signals are currently showing red. The one further away is empty, and both signals are showing green. If we get this cart going, we can see that as the cart enters a block, the light in the direction the cart is coming from turns yellow. This means that there is a moving cart on the track that is moving away from that direction. In the direction the cart is going, the light turns red. Red is dangerous. It means that if you enter the block from that direction, you will hit something, either because it's heading towards you or because it's standing still. Now that we know the basics, it's time to move on to the slightly more advanced aspects of signaling. First, we need to define a few terms that are commonly used when working with signaling. The first is aspects. An aspect is basically a light signal that are emitted by, for example, block signals. The current aspects are red, yellow, green, blinking red, and blinking yellow. And we're going to use these more intimately soon enough. The second term is controllers. A controller is a block that emits an aspect. For example, a block signal is a controller. The third term is receivers. A receiver is a block that will receive an aspect from a controller and react to it depending on which block it is. Our first controller is the block signal, and our first receiver is the distance signal. To pair a controller with the receiver, we need a signal tuner, and we right-click the controller, in this case this block signal, and then we right-click the receiver. And as you can see, the distance signal will reflect the aspect it's receiving upon itself. So when this block signal is showing red, this distance signal will show red. So if we get this cart moving, you can see that the distance signal is changing with the block signal. The next block is both a controller and a receiver. The dual head block signal, which is a block signal and a distance signal combined. So first we linked it to this block signal to define a signal block. Then we use the signal tuner to link this block signal to this distant signal light. So if we get the cart going, you can see the bottom light is reflecting this block signal, while the top light is acting like the block signal. And the final block is the dual head distance signal, which is simply a double distance signal, which can be linked with two separate controllers. And the top light is linked first, and the bottom light is linked second. Now it's time to take a closer look at the new block relays. Here we have a simple setup with 4 relays, 1 in each corner, and we have a distance signal above each one that is linked to the relay underneath, just for clarity. We have 2 signal blocks currently defined, one here and one here. If we get the cart moving, we will see them. So the closer signal here turns yellow, and the faraway one turned red, and the close signal here turned yellow, and the faraway signal here turned yellow, and the close one here turned red. So we have 2 separate blocks, but if we were to link these 2 relays, we would combine these 2 blocks. And as you can see now, when the cart enters the block here, this signal turns yellow, and it is approaching all of these signals, so they show red, and as it passes a signal, it switches to yellow because the cart is now moving away from it. And when the cart is passing by this unsurveyed stretch of track over here, all the signals show green because the block is clear. However, if we were to link these 2 relays, thus defining a fourth signal block, we would have all the signals constantly showing red because the block is now circular. So the cart is constantly approaching all of the signals, no matter where it is, which renders this setup very, very useless. Now it is time to delve even deeper into the world of controllers and receivers. For this section, we will don our TrackMan's goggles, and we will set them to the tuning aura. This will allow us to see connections between controllers and receivers. Now that we're wearing our goggles, it's time to take a look at the switch motor. The switch motor is used to control switch tracks via a redstone signal. We can link it to a controller directly, such as a block signal, and by default it will switch on the red aspect and it will be off on any other aspect. So when the signal turns red, you can see the track switching, and when the signal is red, green, or yellow, the switch motor will be off. If we take our crowbar and right click it, we get this interface where we can see it's currently set to red. We can remove that and set it to green. So now it will switch on the green aspect and it will be off on yellow or red. we can also select multiple aspects. So now it will be on green or yellow, but off on red. Now here we have a Y track with another switch motor, and we want to use this block signal to control this switch as well. But when we link the signal to this motor instead, the connection to this switch motor is cut off, because a controller can only be linked to one receiver at a time. So now we have this switch activating on the red aspect, while this is now still. So we want to control both of these switches with the same signal. That's when we need to use the signal receiver box. The signal receiver box is a receiver. As you can see, it will receive the aspect of the block signal, and if we right click it, we get the same interface, and as you can see, it's currently set to emit a redstone signal when it receives the green aspect, and the switch motor is reacting to the redstone signal. You can also place the signal receiver box right next to the switch motor, and it would have the same effect. So we want the switch motor to only switch on the red aspect, which it's currently doing. But we will also want this switch motor to switch. So we put a signal controller box next to the signal receiver box, and as you can see, they automatically connected. The controller box can be linked to any receiver, so we link it to the switch motor, and the signal controller box will take the aspect that the signal receiver box is receiving, and it will forward it to the receiver it is linked to, which in this case is this switch motor. We can also link it to another receiver box, and we set this to the red aspect as well. So now we can see we have a chain where we start at the block signal, we go to the receiver box, which controls this switch motor. The signal controller box is forwarding the signal to this receiver box, which in turn controls this switch motor. And we could continue this chain for as long as we needed. You can also put up to 4 signal controller boxes, one for each side, around a signal receiver box. So we can have this go in the other direction as well. Now, let's take a look at the odd box that is neither a controller nor a receiver. We have the signal capacitor box. This, when placed next to a signal receiver, it will output a redstone signal, same as the signal receiver. The difference is that it is working as a red power state cell, where it will maintain the redstone signal for a set amount of seconds and then shut it off. And each time this the receiver box receives the correct aspect and emits its redstone signal, the capacitor box will renew the redstone signal and keep maintaining it for another of however many seconds you have set it to. That's all for this time. If you want a practical example on how to use switching and signaling, please take a look at the previous video where at the end I showed how to build a collision prevention system for locomotives. Thanks for watching.